On this week's show, discussing changing how we change, a field-first approach, with Nate Fuller from Placer Solutions. In this week's news, the platform effect, thinking on our feet, industrial espionage, and more. And we're back. All right, Nathan Wood, how you doing? Coming to us from the studio, back on the show. What's happening, man?
Oh, man, we are preparing for the storm. It looks like kids aren't going to be in school tomorrow. I don't know. Is it snowing up there already?
You know what? I think it's going to unfortunately have missed us. So it is not snowing here yet. Although I'm kind of hoping for it, kind of not. My team has me kind of booked. And if it snows and I'm in the house, well, we all know how that goes. Not a happy person.
There's nothing more depressing than snow in the Front Range and not snow in the mountains. It's like, why would that be? That doesn't make any sense.
The only time it's supposed to happen is on Monday Night Football, because that statistically drives bookings up into the mountains because they see it on TV and they don't realize that and us are different. So let's be fine. It's been a great snow year, though, so if this one misses us and goes to you, so be it. Maybe you and J-Mo and Chuck can have a good day off and roll around in the snow and make a snowman or something.
Have to enjoy it when you got it.
That's right. And not to confuse our listeners, but now to Nate Fuller. So we are going to have the Nathan and Nate show. So for once, I am overmatched here. Nate Fuller, how you doing, man?
Yeah, good, man. Great to be on. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. I think you guys are going to be blown away by what Nate has. I know I was when I met him over the break, and I had to get him on the show as fast as I could. So you know this, we're going to get through the cause of the show. Don't want to rush it. So listen to understand, not to reply. If someone struggling is opening up to you, you have an opportunity to build connection through active listening. No one likes a listener who's only thinking about how they're going to reply, but isn't internalizing anything being said. Pay attention to the details of what the person struggling is saying. Watch your body language so you stay open to them. Don't interrupt. Repeat back to them the emotion and content of what they're saying, i.e., it has to be painful that you and your dad haven't spoken in years. Listening to understand allows for empathy and builds a platform of trust that makes it easier to point to resources. That's from Paul Lawson, Project Controls Coordinator and lead mental health advocate, Mid-City Electric Company. If you need any type of resources, go to preventconstructionsuicide.com, or if you're in urgent need, text or dial 988 from your mobile phone. And we're back on YouTube. Check out youtube.com/@the ConTech Crew. Now, I've been watching and you guys are getting better, but make sure you subscribe because you want to get all the new updates, all the new snippets, all the new things that we're doing. Before we get into our show, a little advertisement. I'm here with Robert Shear, VP of Strategy and Business Development for OpenSpace. Robert, tell us a little bit about what is OpenSpace.
OpenSpace is a 360 job site capture, review, and tracking tool. Think of it as an up-to-the-minute Google Street View of your project that people can view anywhere, anytime. Some people also refer to it as like total project recall, right? So what if you could have a photographic memory for all your projects for all time in case something came up in the future? So that's really what it is. How do you use it? Let me grab my camera. You simply just attach a 360 camera to your hard hat, open our app on your phone, open the floor plan, tap where you are and walk. We take care of the rest. So as you walk, we take 2 360 images per second. You come back, upload them to the cloud, and we process that all together, stitch them together, pin all those images to your plans, and deliver it back to you as a navigable 360 environment for everyone to use and share. And typically we deliver it back to you in like 30 to 60 minutes.
And we are back. All right, Nate Fuller. We're all about technology. We're all about the solutions. We're all about those things. But first and foremost, we're about the people. And you've been one in the industry for a long time, man. You've got some real deal experience. So give us a little background. I think you have engineering degrees, et cetera. So give us a little history of how you got here.
Yeah, I've got a pretty standard background, I think, for a lot of folks in construction. I joined Bechtel in 2009. I was a civil engineer by training. Joined Bechtel in Frederick, Maryland. And pretty quickly, the joke's always join Bechtel, see the world. So pretty quickly was off on a boat to different big projects really all over the world. So spent time in Australia, spent time in Papua New Guinea, spent time in the Gulf Coast, British Columbia, Middle East, you name it. So just working on big mega projects really all over the world and just learning how construction's done. So that value chain, the AEC, EPC value chain, figuring out where the different stakeholders are in it and understanding how to navigate it. So just a really great experience. And I spent 10 years at Bechtel. And I spent the last 3 years at Bechtel helping to build out their Office of Innovation. So this was around 2015, 2016. So it's still pretty early days. And I think the technology, or at least the most recent technology journey for construction, I call it the dance, the construction technology dance that we've been having for the past 6 years. And so, I think we've learned a lot of lessons as an industry. We've learned a lot of lessons. I think construction companies have learned a lot of lessons just about being better at technology adoption, because it's a challenging industry. It's a very, very complex industry. At the industry level, there's a lot of complexity and interdependency. And I think sometimes we often forget that there's also a lot of complexity at the firm level within construction companies, because it's a project-based industry, it's a field-based industry. And so from a technology adoption perspective, it becomes very difficult to have continuity of implementation of different technology solutions across these projects. But what I've learned over the years is that it's the people that connect these projects. And it's the people on these teams within construction companies who are having conversations with other people within these project teams about the technology solutions or different ways of doing work that can make their work better. So the consulting work that I do currently is working with large to medium-sized construction companies to really get a handle on the people within their field teams and within their project teams, and then using that to really bridge that gap between the back office decision makers and the folks in the field who are ultimately the end users of these solutions.
So I want to step you back. I think the world could learn a lot from that first thing. And I just looked just to figure it out on Bechtel's website, and their career page says Shaping Tomorrow Together, which I like, but I don't know if yours was tongue in cheek, but join Bechtel, see the world. We should market that. They should market it. If you're listening in, Bechtel, that is fantastic, because you got an international education, which you don't get. Because we don't do EPC the way, the rest of the world does it. We don't do anything the way the rest of the world does it. So I'm interested at how that experience, and getting to go to those each places may have influenced you along the way.
Well, that's an interesting question. I think that it allows you to get that cultural perspective that is otherwise unknown. Typically a lot of construction companies are regional. And so you have a really good understanding of kind of the regional market and the regional customers and the regional subcontractors. Whereas once you start traveling internationally, you really get a much broader understanding, not just of the processes and the technology, but the people that, are that universal trait that undergirds all of it. So understanding how to navigate these different cultures is I think really important, because we always say people create culture and culture creates change. So, getting a handle on different cultures is kind of that intermediate step, and understanding how the people influence those cultures is really important as well.
And I think it probably shaped the future. So, you had those years in the field and you had those years traveling to the projects, and then you started working on the innovation and started mapping it all out. I got to imagine that cultural experience led you to the years of working on innovation there, on, helping and looking at the different ways that you're implementing or ways that you're affecting in the cultural differences.
Yeah, I think, just kind of connect. It sounds like we're connecting the dots here between that experience and the consulting work that I do now with the, mapping of change agents around the organization. I think what the work I did, the international work that I did at Bechtel, helped reveal to me was that the project-based nature of the industry makes it really hard to have continuity of implementation of these different solutions, because the opportunity for change on a construction project is at the beginning of the project. Once the project is going, you're off to the races, and that's it. You've got your solutions stacked up, you've got your people stacked up, and you've got 2 or 3 years to execute on everything. And each time you do that, you're kind of uprooting things. And so that experience of going from project to project, not just within, a certain state or region or even country, but doing it internationally, every year or two, I was meeting new people, and we would have to create a new team on a new project. And I think it was it put it in a really stark relief, some of the challenges that we face. And I have to say, Bechtel handles this really well. I mean, that's why they're one of the largest construction companies in the world. Their ability to put together high performing teams and export that globally is part of their secret sauce. And I just was able to see a new way of doing that. How do we manage talent in a way that allows us to adopt technology better? How do we mix and match different people with different technology expertise on new projects so that they're set up to best perform? I think those are all things that were that you can see when you're working on these large international projects.
So you're right, Nate. What I was doing there is trying to connect the dots, because it took me a little while to figure out where you are today versus where you came from and your experience in the field internationally, and then the 2 years of experience in innovation. You designed something, or in my opinion, put your finger on something that's a huge challenge for the industry. So tell me a little bit about what you're doing now and how it came to be. And really, what is it? Explain to people, because it's extremely innovative.
Yeah, it's something that was really born out of experience, to be honest. I spent those years in the field with Bechtel around the world out on projects. And around 2015, 2016, as I mentioned, Bechtel made a large strategic investment to drive innovation internally within the organization, and then also to engage externally with innovative startup founders and others around the industry who are looking at new ways of doing work. We called it the Future Fund, and again, it was this investment in changing things, and really formed the basis of the Office of Innovation. So coming into it in 2015, there was just a handful of us, a handful of people involved in this endeavor, and there was no textbook written at that time on what to do. And so here we are. There's 5 of us in this 40,000 person organization, and I have my network to tap. The other folks on the team have their network to tap. But that's really only surface level. And the realization came about halfway through the time building out the Office of Innovation, where it was kind of brass tacks. It was like, okay, guys, let's get stuff done. We need to start showing some ROI here. And we were really leaning hard into our network of folks around the company, really oil and gas heavy. Some folks in infrastructure, a lot of folks in infrastructure were involved. Mining and metals was involved, and nuclear security, environmental at that time was involved as well. But it's a huge organization. And so came to the realization that there's just a lot of people out in the field day to day who are having these conversations about technology and about new ways of doing work. They're reading the news, they're seeing all this cool tech stuff out there, and they're like, man, if I could only get this in my hands so I can use it on my project and begin to, perhaps automate or make my life easier, they would just be chomping at the bit for it. But there's not that internal resource in the organization to go to, or maybe they just kind of fly under the radar and they're not the kind of person to put their hand up. I want to say, hundreds of these, perhaps thousands of these people across any large construction company. And so the challenge was really finding out who those people were. And so it's really hard to do in a large and medium-sized construction company because of this field-based and project-based nature of our work. So the consulting work that I do currently is working with large to medium-sized construction companies to do what's called a network analysis. And we really dive deep into the construction organization to highlight what we call field influencers. So this is the hidden soft power out on construction sites, the folks who are having those conversations and pushing new technology that are otherwise just kind of flying under the radar. And what this network analysis does is it highlights who those individuals are. Because the technology and innovation leadership teams, they likely think they know who those folks are, but in actuality, the peer identified folks are likely very different than who they think they are. So that's the first step. And then also what we do is we develop.
I want to pause you there
personas.
I want to pause you there for 1 second, because when I hear network, and I know that everybody listening, when they hear network, at least a lot of them think of, are you analyzing network traffic or looking at who's using what software? No, you're actually talking about a people network.
That's right. It's how different people are connected around the field teams.
Awesome.
Exactly.
So keep going. Sorry but I wanted to reset because that took me a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. And thanks for that. Because it is somewhat difficult to describe. It gets really heady at points, but once people see it and see it in action, and they realize how valuable this information is, it becomes very clear very quickly. So I'll just round this out by saying that the other thing we do is we develop personas around different individuals within the field teams. So another challenge that construction companies have with technology adoption is that oftentimes they'll just swamp the entire organization with all of these new shiny objects. And you end up getting what's called innovation fatigue. Folks are just kind of sick and tired of hearing about all this stuff because they're not interested in it. It's not applicable to what they do. They don't really have too much interest in it. So the personas are really valuable because that allows you to really hyper focus your message, your innovation message, so that when a new startup or new technology or new vendor comes through your door, you know exactly who in the organization to point to, kind of playing that air traffic controller approach. Go have a chat with these folks on this field team. And it just really allows you to do your enterprise-wide technology strategy much better.
Can you dig into the personas? Because at CPC we use the term personas, and I'm curious if we use them the same way. So, like, what would be an example of different personas?
Yeah, so a good example would be a client that I worked with who was a heavy civil contractor. They had a lot of folks who were interested in drones and machine control, and they also had a lot of folks who were interested in BIM and laser scanning. And not to say that those folks weren't interested in the other thing, but just generally based on the way they respond, you can begin to build profiles around different individuals. So you're not sending the BIM stuff to the machine control folks and vice versa.
Very interesting. Because I guess the way we would use persona would be like the role typically that they would play, a foreman or a project engineer or whatever, and then they're like interest tags. But it gets into this point of essentially this constellation that you've built, which is based on almost like a graph architecture. I don't even know if that's the right terminology for tying all these different types of categories together that have kind of common subsets underneath them. And I think that's the only way we can get to this level of standardization and analytics and insights and stuff like that, is if we start somewhere with some level of standards. So like, I guess other than personas or interests, like what are the other ways that you're kind of segmenting the audience and creating those different tags?
Yeah, no, and that's a great point. It's like, unless we as an organization know the people within our organization and are able to profile them, really, that's the first step in any change management initiative. I'll say that it's kind of like a baseball card, right? I forget who gave me this analogy, but they relayed it back to me. It's like you've got all the stats. You've got the player, and then you've got all the stats. They're a project manager. They've been with the company this many years. This is like an extra. This is like the sabermetrics level of statistics for construction change management, where there's just like an extra level of detail where you can begin to assign different technology interests and different technology personas to people. What we also do is we're also able to look at sub-networks of different individuals. So what ends up happening is that a lot of folks within construction companies move across the organization from project to project to project, and they just naturally are friends with and know folks within certain parts of the organization. And so that sub-network is another piece of information that's useful.
You hit on a couple of things there that I find interesting. And I think when people who are listening in, if you start to think about what this looks like, it does look a lot like a technology network map, but the persona itself, so the person, as you get to a connector in that world. So if you think in the Adam Grant world, they'd be a connector, they get bigger on your graph that you show. And I think that's an unusual but simplistic way to find those people, because I know this from my years of doing this as a consultant. I'd feel like I found a hotbed and I'd be working with them, and then I'd go off and do the other things, and I'd come back and I'd be like, the hotbed's gone. Where'd it go? And I think you just explained it. That group, they break up and they go. And so how do you teach an organization, or how do you use the information that you're getting to then drive some sort of change or help them?
Really, it's exactly it. It's like, poof, they're gone. They're on a new project. Any construction tech startup who has a sales team knows that process like very well. It's hard once the project winds down to then you're basically reselling onto a new project. The way that the construction companies themselves use this information is by letting it streamline and facilitate and really set the foundation of their change management initiative. So, we've done this with clients that are looking at emerging technology roadmaps that they want to put together. So they're starting at square one. They want to put together an emerging technology roadmap, but they want to make sure it's grounded in the business. And so what this does is it sets the foundation for that. It just gives that snapshot. I mentioned the heavy civil contractor client. It gives that snapshot of the different personas and different technologies that folks are thinking about. And then that allows them to begin connecting the dots within the organization about how to actually get pilots done, who to intro startups to, things like that. There's kind of a second group of companies who have existing innovation or business transformation or emerging technology programs in place. And so they already kind of have the strategic framework figured out. I've recently finished up with a client. They put a lot of work into just understanding the categories, and they had 8 categories that were their strategic initiatives. And so very similar process. It's like, does this initiative resonate with these different people around the organization? But furthermore, how are those different people framing this? So, is AI closely associated with, Autodesk kind of things? And you can tease this out through the process and again, build those personas. So yeah, there's kind of 2 buckets. There's the construction companies that are just starting at square one, looking at either an enterprise-wide field-facing project management, safety, health, environmental quality software solution that they want to implement or select. There are, and that also includes construction companies that are looking at emerging technologies. And then there's the ones that kind of have these existing innovation and business transformation teams in place.
I know you've talked with Stacy Smedley before with Skanska and all the work she's doing in the sustainability world with EPDs. And you mentioned baseball cards before, got me thinking, because she compares the environmental product documentation data that you get to the nutritional facts on like a cereal box, something like that. And anytime I see, whether it's a baseball card or nutritional facts, I look at, okay, but what is the standards body that's driving the need for everybody to adhere to that? Whether it's the FDA for the food, whether it's, again, and even talking to Stacy, a lot of the sustainability efforts, if it's not Skanska or like the company driving it, it's probably, or the owner, it's probably not going to happen. But at least there are systems around driving that. And so as we look at, like scaling these opportunities and the role you've been in or the role you have now, like where are you seeing kind of those pockets of innovation for driving better standards or consolidating around standards? That's such a big topic, but yet everything we just been talking about is that every project's different and everyone's got their own flavor and all this stuff. So like, again, only because I feel like I'm looking in the mirror, hearing your story, and we have very similar backgrounds. That's like where I'm getting stuck now. And I'm sure you're in the middle of that too, and curious where your head's at on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was Briston Blair he's with Comfort Systems currently. He was the one that gave me the baseball card analogy. So I want to give a shout out to him. He's a great guy and love working with him. No, I mean, I think that's it. There's pockets of innovation, right, Nathan? You saw this at DPR, I'm sure. And that's kind of the low-hanging fruit, to be honest. I mean, those were the folks at Bechtel that we went to initially. A lot of them were folks that we knew or knew of. And so it was an easy task to kind of reach out to those folks and begin engaging them and kind of understanding what their secret sauce was and hoping to scale that across the organization. But I think you kind of hit a certain point, right? You hit a certain point where it's like, okay, the usual suspects are all accounted for. It's like, what's the next gear, right? How do we really scale this thing?
Yeah.
And this is, this is definitely what I'm describing here is definitely geared towards kind of the larger, medium-sized construction companies, but I think the same process, the same thought process applies to even smaller firms. It's like, you just got to know your people and you got to, put together business requirements for any type of product selection or product implementation exercise. And you've got to do that right off the bat and really do it well in order to be successful with any kind of new software implementation.
And thinking through the legwork of that onboarding, I mean, if someone has an existing, internal company database, like do you take an export of that, or do you like plug into it depending on what it is, or like what are you starting from as far as the existing data of who you have, and then starting to like layer on all this additional information, right?
Oh, I see. Yeah. So the nuts and bolts of it, obviously there's a little bit of secret sauce here. So I don't want to divulge too much. I want to say it's not tied to any, it's not tied to any, existing backend systems. It's a customized survey that goes out around the organization, and we work in tandem with the technology lead, or oftentimes the COO or the CEO to get that thing out into people's hands.
Got it.
It's completely baffling to me. Well, and I can see it. Like it's so simple. It's been right in front of us, and we didn't see it. And you're right. At the small organizations, so if you listen to last week, we had Dustin Burns from McCown Gordon, and he talks about when they were a $50 million contractor and they moved to Procore in 2012. He got everybody in the room and said, "Okay, we're going to move in 2 weeks." Well, now they're an $850 million organization, and he cannot do that. And he's had to change his mindset and scale his mindset. So, yeah, while this might not apply right now to the small companies, the medium and large companies, it does. And I'm thinking, and Nate, this is completely out of left field, but like, as I look out at the AECO industry, is there an opportunity for us to somehow map out, because these project teams storm and norm across the country, is there a way that we can start to map that so that so say you've got this owner, this owner's rep, this architect, this GC, these mechanicals, electricals, plumbers, like, hey, here's that network, and here's how we start to overlay it and understand how we don't just storm and norm on every project. We show up and we're almost storming before we even norm, like, because we already know.
100%. Yeah. I mean, the construction industry is so complex. It's like, and it can only be as fast as its slowest innovator. These projects can have 30 to 40 subcontractors on them, and you can have one just sprinting out ahead a million miles an hour, but they can only go so fast because they're held up by all the other folks that also need to use their systems. I'll say that, I think at an industry level, that's hugely important. I think software vendors, part of their job and responsibility is to begin integrating these processes. I think there's a huge pot of gold at the end of that, whoever can figure that out. I want to say that the reason I'm focused more on the construction firms themselves is because I think that's the biggest roadblock at the moment to tech adoption. Is construction companies need to get better at understanding how to successfully manage change within their organizations. And I'm glad you brought up Procore, because that's the topic du jour, right? But even with Procore, you have all these bells and whistles, all the different modules within it, and you have all these different users on your job site that are going to be using it in different ways. And so the process that we use at Placer Solutions is also very useful for that initial product implementation. So using the process to begin to understand your users around the organization, and then set yourself up for success during the Procore implementation is an area that this works as well. So I'm glad you brought that up.
It's awesome, because we had that talk last week with Dustin Burns. He called it all of that left of center need that facilitates good adoption. And it's kind of interesting because it's the left of center need is pre-construction, right? Like, we need good planning to deliver good projects. And far too often we're like, ooh, shiny toy, gonna work. Even if we do it, like, it matches my process. So yes, it's great here. And then we just chuck it and we're like, see ya, we're out. Doesn't work. So you're talking about amplifying that left of center and not just looking at it programmatically from like, hey, here's the things we need to do. You're looking at it from a people perspective.
That's right. Here's the super user who's going to be using Procore every day out on a project. Let's get their feedback. Or here's the user that's dependent on Procore and the data that Procore is gathering. Let's get their input, and then use that from day one to put together an implementation plan that is much more likely to be successful because you've taken that step of putting together all the business requirements and talking to users from the get-go. So yeah, that's exactly it.
That's awesome. Nathan?
Well, and then it gets you thinking about when do you want to have the power user test it, and when do you want to have almost like the person adverse to it test it, and see like if they're okay with it, right? Because it's all about, as you said, that weakest link innovation that, you know, it's only going to work if we can get everybody on board with it. And I think that's what is so fun and interesting about working with contractors, is that there are so many opportunities that are not taken because of what I would call internal politics or just not aware or operational inefficiencies, but then there's a whole slew of other reasons that are, you know, quote unquote outside of the control of the contractor, and that I'm sure you're encountering. And so like when those sorts of things come up, how do you kind of handle that different approach where if it's an internal innovation barrier, there's probably you'd approach it one way. If it's external, you know, owner or architect or other driven, then you probably handle it a different way, right?
Totally. Yeah, you almost call them the anti-change change agent, right? The kind of folks who are resistant to things. I mean, I think, look, experience shows that it's like 10% of an organization is needed to successfully implement change. And in construction, that's mostly field users and it's mostly project users, but it's also a big number. I mean, if you're a 1,000-person organization, it's not the super users that are going to make or break your change initiative. It's the 100 other folks out there that are going to be using it that need to have buy-in and need to be sitting at that table. And Jeff, to your point, it's like if you're a construction company who's small enough to literally get everyone in the same room, well, then do that. But if you're even somewhat larger, it becomes really difficult to do that, and that's where the placer solution exercise can be really, really useful and valuable for understanding that.
My network mind wants to reverse engineer it. I want to find the groups that move without technology. They're like, ooh, technology, nope, going that way. Ooh, like the moving piece that you're like, no, I'm going to get you and I'll hold you down and I'm just going to introduce you to it. I'm not going to use it as a stick. I just want to know where you went and I want to know why. And honestly, I want to know why. So that's my thing, but I interrupted you, Nate. Where were you going to go with that?
Oh, I was just going to I want to riff off of what you just said. I mean, I think there are a lot of egos in the industry. I think egos define the industry, and there's a lot of folks that have been doing things for many years. And part of having an ego is, not willing to admit that either you're doing something non-optimally or perhaps there's a better way to do things. And so overcoming that, I think, is a big challenge of the industry. But I do think that focusing on the folks who are more receptive of change and really empowering and enabling them to be those change agents out around an organization. But firstly, finding out who those folks are and understanding what their needs are.
Yeah. And if you find the vice versa, right, it could be about teaming them together, right? It could be about like, can we find a project where this change agent needs this person for their skill set and maybe together we can teach them? That was one of the things I learned early on at the masonry contractor was I thought the org chart showed me who was important. And I had the president of the Denver division take me in at the Christmas party and say, do you want to know who the most important person in the room is? And I was like, yeah. Let's look around. Who are they all standing around to listen talk? And there was one gentleman in the corner holding court. He was discussing and talking and he went, if you want to make change, that's who you have to get. And you're just taking this to another level. I just find this fascinating.
Yeah, that's it. It's a soft power. It's the folks in the field using this stuff. And it's a challenge in the industry because there is this gap between the back office and the field in a lot of cases. The folks in the back office are making the purchasing decisions around software, and it's the folks in the field who are forced to use it in some cases. So how do we bridge that gap? And I want to say that the assessment and the exercise that we do with our clients really helps that.
Yeah, I mean, once I saw it, I knew that was the case. Nathan, I know you had some questions, maybe a little bit more about the process of where the AEC industry is going.
Well, and I mean, maybe it's a future state, or maybe there's examples where it's already here. But I feel like the natural progression is that after an organization has gone through this and figured out and built good health around their systems, that the project itself, at the project delivery, would go through that sort of similar approach and setup, and you'd have to learn about each other, and then it adds a whole new slew of what stuff do you tag to people as far as like personality profiles or strength finders, or like other thing, all these kind of like soft skill aspects that are really key to what makes good, high performing dynamic teams. And like, if you have that information reported, then what kind of analytics and reporting could you do off of, project delivery success if you had that more granular level of, individual information? Yeah, it's interesting that I don't know if that's, an area where you've got kind of gone down that rabbit hole, but I certainly, from the IPD days, I'm still imagining this world where we can bring those things in and need platforms like what you're building to do that, but kind of only when the organizations have first gone through that and are familiar with it, are we kind of ready to have that project level. So guessing the project level is not quite there yet. We're still working on the organizations.
I think the projects. I mean, yeah, no, I hear you. I think the project teams a lot of them are there. They're there. They're just waiting. They're waiting for, the green. I shouldn't say they're waiting for the green light, because that takes agency away from them. Like, they're fully capable of doing what they want to do. Here's what ends up happening is they end up just like pulling out their personal credit card, just using stuff in the field, and you get this whole shadow IT built up. And the enterprise completely loses control of the ship, and the construction company's kind of left playing catch up at that point. Whereas this allows the construction company to really kind of get ahead of things and make better decisions, more strategic decisions, better informed decisions about the technology solutions that they're using.
I fully agree with you. And I think you're helping the organizations take that step forward, which is exactly what we need, right? They build momentum. So I'm interested with that momentum, looking forward through your forwards lens, 23, 24, you're out there on the edge. Kind of what's a prediction / hope going forward for organizations and people, especially that are listening in, that are looking for that nugget?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think we're entering a new technology era. I think the first wave or the first dance of emerging tech is kind of past. And Nathan, you were a part of that at a large construction organization. I was a part of that at a large construction organization. But this is all the field-facing applications. It's the digitization of existing processes. It's all the project management software, the check software that's out in the field. Like, that stuff's, people have been exposed to it. And there's been a lot of hype around it. And naturally what happens after hype is that people get a little disillusioned, and it wasn't the silver bullet that everyone expected it to be. But it's out there, and folks know about it. And there were a lot of lessons learned along the way. We're sitting here talking about some of those lessons. What I see happening in the next several years is a flourishing of citizen development and emerging technology trends that are going to allow the field users to not lean on IT or corporate innovation or corporate technology to give them the green light to do things. There's going to be a whole slew of tools out there that allow non-IT individuals to basically build applications for themselves and for their project teams. And I think that the construction companies who can get ahead of that are the ones that are going to have a very clear understanding of their people. They're going to know what motivates them, what their interests are. They're going to have that baseball card profile built out, and they're going to help. They're going to be able to steer things from a strategic perspective, and also not play catch up when everyone's out there building applications that have all. I mean, we live in the modern world. There's all kinds of cybersecurity concerns. There's a lot of concerns that you have from a corporate level, and so they're not going to be playing catch up when that happens.
I like that. The democratization of the solutions themselves, but in some sort of container that IT can steer and make sure is there. Nathan, I just said something that got you.
Well, I think that's the whole dilemma, right? I mean, that's where we get stuck in this term innovation that we've thrown around. I mean, I wanted to steal Todd Wine's question of the hour of, what does innovation really mean to you? But I think we've talked about it enough that we have a good understanding of the people, process, technology component, and people is such a huge part of it. But at the same time, like we're talking about agency to let individuals do what makes sense and come up with new ideas, which of course the innovator in me says, yes, we have to keep that. But that's like in direct defiance to standardization and scaling and all this network effect and baseball card and things that we're talking about, right? So it's like that's where I keep getting stuck, and I don't know the answer. And maybe you're getting closer to it of standards versus this structured innovation, for lack of a better word, and finding that together. So I mean, I think your platform of what you're creating is a great way to start doing that, right? To bring in and find ways what we can tag, and it sounds like there's an ability to create more of those tags of what are the things that are important. But I think that's maybe the larger question of the industry is, what things do you want to track people or things or projects or whatever by, and in doing so will then drive those standards. But until people start using the tools, we can't even get there, right?
Well, that's it. I think we're a hybrid. We're at a hybrid period too. It's like you can't just throw the brakes on things because corporate says no. It hasn't worked for the past several decades. It's definitely not going to work in the past next decade. So there's a middle ground here. And the first step is the smart construction companies are going to understand what motivates their employees, what their interests are, and begin to have those conversations at a granular level and understand what their folks are doing, why they're doing it, and begin to put some strategic framework or structure, if you want to call it that, around it. But rather than taking this very top-down approach, there's a middle ground here.
Yeah, I think your networking analogy has a lot to do with that. I also think that the modernization of software. So Nathan, some of the things that you're worried about is, it's like I use this analogy at Join a lot to talk about platforms. Is it's like taking my daughter bowling and not putting the bumpers up. We roll gutter balls all day, nobody wins, and it ends with somebody crying and me drinking too much beer. But if we put the bumpers up, which is the security, it's the rails, it's the thing that you do, we start hitting pins and we start to understand, we start to roll the ball better. Even though we miss, we bounce off the sides and we hit a few pins and we get a few wins. And this is about, the organization meeting the individuals where they are. And so shadow IT becomes removed because you've already shown an interest in them. You've already connected with them, and you're not force feeding, you're responding to their needs, and they now know they have a path. And once you create that path and they know the bumpers are up, they're going to work inside of it. They go outside the bumpers when it doesn't work, right? When nothing's there for them, that's what's going to happen. So I think that's there. I think we could talk about this for a while. Nate, where can people go, learn more about you? Because I think they're going to be really intrigued.
Yeah, so we have a website, placersolutions.io. Otherwise, feel free to just email me, nate.fuller@placersolutions.io. That's
awesome. I love it when it's small enough and young enough and new enough that they go right to the source. I wish we had more time, but we have to wrap up and talk about the construction news of the week. But before we do, another advertisement. And I'm back with Robert Shear, VP of Strategy and Business Development for OpenSpace. There's a lot of reality capture out there, a lot of 360 products out there. What really sets OpenSpace apart?
From the start, we really focused on speed and simplicity. If you want your field teams to use stuff, it better be easy, it better be fast. And so our focus is 100% on making life easier for people to build stuff. All our advanced tech is wrapped in a really super simple experience. It just works the first time, every time. And it works at the speed of construction, which to us means getting things turned around in less than an hour, so that if you walk at 7 a.m, by 8 o'clock, you can share that with your team and you can coordinate work and kind of track issues.
Awesome. Well, so who is really the OpenSpace product focused at? Are you looking at trade contractors, general contractors, owners? Who's your real, users?
Yeah, it's really all of the above. I think we started focusing on GCs, and I'd say that's probably most of our users. But now we've got real strong adoption with trades. A lot of owners are writing it right into the spec for the project. With the GCs, it's a lot of capturing maybe every other day, once a week, to really provide that context for the team. Trades tend to use them a lot more actively. They're using them to track progress, track team productivity. And then owners, again, love to have that sort of oversight and visibility into the project. We've got 100,000 active users on the platform. We've got our users have captured over 10 billion square feet in over 70 countries. And more of our customers are moving from using OpenSpace on one or two projects to really using it across their whole project portfolio.
That's awesome. Where can they learn more about open space?
Yeah, I'd point them to two places. One is openspace.ai. Check it out, look around. If you want to learn more, there's request a demo buttons all over the place. Click that. The other one is we're going to be at a ton of trade shows and conferences, both sort of national ones like AU and Groundbreak, but also regional ones. So if you go to openspace.ai/events, you can see a calendar and, stop by and say hi.
Hey, Nathan Wood, what do you have for us today?
All right, quick backstory on this one. So I was actually listening to a Freakonomics podcast, and there was mentioned about the overwhelming number of apps that are deployed at the corporate level. So I had to go and do this research and find this report from Okta, which, Jeff, I'm sure you know Okta is in like the IT security identity space. Doesn't matter. If you scroll through, there's a graph in there, average number of apps per customer by industry. So of course, construction, engineering, and architecture is listed there. And I will tell you, it is above government and energy, mining, oil, and gas, but still towards the bottom. But I think you'd be amazed that they average from 2017 down at 66 apps, all the way up to 2020 is now at 83 apps per company installed, which, you would think is astounding. I think those of us that are in the industry and think about an IT department go, yeah, man, 83 apps, that's probably about right. Other industries, it goes up to 155 plus apps that companies have to now install on companies. So I think this whole attempt to consolidate onto one platform, as appealing as that is not going to happen and isn't going to go anytime soon. We'll probably have more apps, but I think that maybe that my hypothesis is that separation of standardizing data to then democratize across kind of this bring your own app might actually solve that problem. But I don't know, guys, what you think?
This is one of those problems that what I think the graph really shows is that this isn't going to get any easier. And so if you thought you could weather the storm or bury your head in the sand to avoid the end state, well, you're never going to avoid it. So it's time to pick your head up and look around. But I agree with you too on the number of apps. There's no one ring to rule them all, but it is a matter of understanding and managing how many apps people have to deal with and how you roll them out. The reason Okta did this, and let's look at why they did this. They're a source of single sign-on, right? And a place to make it easier to log in and out of those things. So they're trying to show you that this is all the different apps you have. How do you secure it and make sure that it's locked down? Well, you've got to use a source of single sign-on so that if you shut somebody down, you can shut them down across all the applications. There was a reason for this, but ultimately it's showing us a lot. I mean, Nate, this can't be of a surprise to you to see how many apps people are using, to see what how the numbers are playing out.
No, like we talked about, I think there's a demand for this stuff on construction sites, and folks are going to use it whether it's ordained by the company and tied into their authentication and single sign-on or not. They're just going to use it. So not surprised.
Yeah. And I would say secure it.
That's a good point. That's only the reported apps. Who knows how many other apps that aren't even reported are being used. So that's a good point, Nate. That's only the reported apps.
Yeah, how many of them have? Where was Trello on that for all the people who use Trello for free, who use those other things for free? Yeah, I'm with you.
Okay, so moving on, in a small bout of celebration for standards, as you hadn't noticed, I'm a big fan of proponent of standards. Doesn't mean I adhere to them, but those that come from the reality capture and the surveying world, I know from my experience in BIM, we've had issues with layout before between survey feet and international feet and state plane and all these other translations. So the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, has finally put the lights out on the U.S. survey foot. They've now adopted the international survey foot. So again, for those of you that are in that reality capture surveying world and folks are still bringing up the U.S. survey foot, we can remind them that that's now dead, and it's one less thing that we have to translate between, and one step closer to world standardization. Right, Jeff?
I was going to say, I'm about to say, and the metric system next as I duck.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, one day.
Wait. Small wins. We're celebrating small wins. This is a big one because I read through it, and the difference when you're measuring small amounts is not a lot, but when you talk about thousands of miles, all of a sudden little problems become big things. Who's ever heard of that? Like if you have a deviation of your steel and your structure as you move up and you go up 14, 15 floors, it becomes a real big deal. So y'all know how this works. Standardization is the way. Nate, any thoughts on this one? This was out of our wheelhouse, but I kind of like it.
No, I mean, I'm an engineer by training. I'm all for standardization.
Yeah.
There you go. It's the engineer in
Civil engineers unite. Yeah.
Well, to stay on topic, since we did just talk about sprawl of apps, we talked about securing them with Okta, industrial espionage. So I'm going to go to the BBC. Industrial espionage, how China sneaks out America's technology secrets. And if you thought things weren't getting even more advanced, I'm going to tell you, and I have to read how this was done just so you guys know how incredibly difficult it was. So this person was sneaking data out in a file that looked like a sunset, but inside of the metadata, they were hiding the information that they were stealing from, and this was on wind turbines, so that China can gain the technological know-how and catch up with what we're doing because their economy is growing so fast. Their things are growing so fast. And the other part of this that was so interesting to me, was American ingenuity is still where they're coming for ideas, right? So why is this important to a builder? Well, listen, it's the U.S. citizen hid confidential files stolen from his employer in the binary code of a digital photograph of a sunset and then emailed it to himself. Think about that for a second. Why is that important? Because you, construction, are building our laboratories, our pharmaceuticals, our higher education. All of you, they're after the lowest common denominator. They're going to get those plans. They're going to get those things any way they can to exfiltrate them out. And so security has to be top of mind. And I just thought this was, stealing wind turbine information in that kind of a format. Nathan, what are your thoughts?
I don't know if you've ever seen Mr. Robot. It made me think of Mr. Robot and all the different ways that they did some just crazy hacking. But I actually, what it makes me think of, the point that they're still trying to steal U.S. innovation is that, what is the culture of America that leads to this level of innovation, and what is the culture of China that doesn't allow innovation? And back to the point of standardization and top down everything. So I think, to contradict myself, I think that's a great point. Yeah, go ahead.
I think the irony is that I think in America, what allows open innovation is the fact that we're so open, and in China is not. And so they come to us. And so the fact that we're much more open with our work and maybe less secure in the handling of our information. So there's kind of that, it's ironic to a degree, I guess I would say.
Yeah, the irony wasn't lost on that one as well. There's a little bit of, to me, Nathan, it shows that we need the innovators, the free thinkers, and we need the executors and the people who like to dot their I's and cross their T's and push everything through. So, but ultimately, if security is an afterthought, then it's not going to work. So we could talk about that till we're blue in the face. I'm going to have a little bit of fun. I got an email on this. I was watching the news on it. So Apple unveils the M2 Pro and the M2 Max chips featuring new neural engine and more. So there's a ton in here about how much GPU capabilities, how much CPU capabilities, all the capabilities that Apple says it's now got a handle on because it's building its own chipsets and it's handling the manufacturing, which also, since now they own the manufacturing, they own the chips, and they also own the operating system that works on it, they're really able to tweak the operating system. So man, Apples are getting faster and faster, but they've always been really good at what they do. And that's why I wanted to bring this one up, because even Apple understands that building hardware to meet your workflow is the key to getting faster. So in this one, they've got more battery life and all that. But Apple's latest 16-core neural engine capable of 15.8 1.8 trillion operations per second and up to 40% faster than the generation before. And the neural engine accelerates machine learning tasks such as video analysis, voice recognition, image processing, and more, and enhances camera image quality. These are all things that have always been core to what Apple users do. How do you think of that? So when your IT people sit down and think about BIM, it's not just BIM. Do you do Revit? Right? Do you do photogrammetry? Do you do other forms of reality capture? Do you do other forms of processing? You have to match the hardware to the workflow. So that was my soapbox. I'll get down now. Nathan, I know you're a big MacBook user. Are you running out and getting a new one tomorrow?
I mean, I will say I do not try and do BIM on a Mac because there are very limited apps that do it. We'll start there. But I do, and just the point that, yeah, there's a big difference between BIM Lite, because actually Revisto works very well on a Mac. And I have been just having a lot of fun using that, and certainly it can handle those. But I think, it's only a matter of time. And I have to imagine this is setting up for a lot of what they're going to do with virtual reality and where that's going to go, or kind of this whole passive thing. I've already heard rumors about that. So it seems like it's just, setting themselves up to be the physical touch where, like Google and others take the whole software and storage stuff. But if they can handle the hardware, as they've shown, they can control the marketplace and can do a lot of damage when they just change one little setting in their background settings and can completely disrupt, whole marketplaces. So interesting to see what comes out of it.
Yeah, I was wondering which one I was going to go with, because I heard about, they're holding back on some of the virtual and augmented reality things they're going to do. They're waiting for a few things, so that's got some other people interested. And then there was the whole big shakeup. They might actually make a touchscreen. Like, they may go against how many years, of fighting it. They may actually start to go with a touchscreen of some sort, although most of us thought that the iOS was going to make it to the Mac before that happened, and that was one of the stoppers. But I wasn't recommending people just buy Macs for BIM, by the way. I was saying buy a box that's built for your workload. Nate, what do you have on this one? You running out and getting another one, an M2 Pro tomorrow, or are you waiting for that touchscreen?
No, I'm with Nathan on this one. I think a lot of the workflows currently are non-Mac. Not to say I don't like Mac. I think they build some awesome products and have a lot of friends at Apple who are involved with building those products out. I mean, this is the trend, right? It's like closer and closer to the edge, getting the compute closer to the user, and allowing them to do cooler and cooler things with it. And this is also the type of technology news that those field influencers, those technology enthusiasts out in the field, they see this kind of stuff and they're like, why aren't we doing this? And who in the organization can I go talk to? And if I can't find them, I'm just going to do it myself, kind of thing. This is exciting technology news, and I think an opportunity for construction to be, if they use it in the right way.
You're exactly right. It's all about the right tool. Although we did talk about this a lot recently, to construction, everything looks like a hammer. So, can that MacBook hammer in a nail any better? Well, I don't know. We'll see. Nate, thank you for stopping in, joining us today, and on short notice jumping in and doing an episode. I really appreciate it, and I think it was worth everybody hearing. And I hope you guys reach out to Nate.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, Nathan C. Wood, it's great to see you, my man. I hope the snow keeps falling, and I hope to see you on a slope sometime soon.
Strap them up, baby.
Thank you for tuning in today to geek out for our interview with Nate Fuller. To read all our news stories, learn more about apps, workflows, and hardware, and to listen to the show, visit thecontechcrew.com. This is the ConTech Crew signing out. Until next time, enjoy the ride and geek out.